All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining. I have done quite a few presentations, training, almost 15 years now, but this is my first time talking at a Mac conference, so thank you very much for coming and seeing me and supporting me. I'm a little nervous, but it's good that you can still get nervous these days. And I know that the crowd of people, the level of Mac knowledge that attends conferences like this is quite high, so very flattered to be here. My name is Ulrik, and when I tell this to non-Danish people, I am from Denmark, they say, oh yeah, Lars Ulrik, the drummer from Metallica. Or German people will say, yeah, Jan Ulrich, the cyclist. And the first part of my surname is my partner's. And she taught me when we met, we got married very early on, that it's pronounced Obi, you know, like that guy Obi-Wan Kenobi. And I'm like, whoa, okay, I'll take it, no worries. But I don't play drums. I cycle as a means of transportation, but nothing else. And let's face it, I would not be safe with a lightsaber. But I do, however, have a company with my buddy Kenneth here, kind enough to be in the front row. And we love to talk about technology. So we have a company called TalkTech. We are Apple certified trainers, and we also train for Jamf. So we do a lot of training, but really any bespoke training in Apple related sciences or MDM technologies, we're happy to do that. Outside of training and a little bit of consultancy, I'm a huge foodie. I know Rob said he was born in a bakery. I think in a former life I was born in a kitchen. I do play some instruments and I love to sing, and I am a very late bloomed gamer. My nephew got me into gaming at a very late age. It also has led to some retro gaming, so if you're happy to talk about things like the analog pocket or modding your PS3, then come see me. So, show of hands, who has ever felt restricted physically, mentally, technologically in your work at some point in life, in your career? Yeah, I would think so. Unfortunately, it's often more common that we are restricted than we get freedom to roam around. But I'm here to make the claim, and I know that some people have realized this, but not everyone, that it shouldn't always be like this. We need to balance restrictions and security with usability, or the user experience suffers, and then users become creative. So I want to start by kind of categorizing some of the different restrictions that you can set with your mobile device management system. And then I want to introduce, I feel it's a little show-offy to call it a framework, so I'm going to call it an approach to when you set a restriction, what are some of the considerations you should do to make sure you are balancing that restriction and the vulnerability you're trying to protect against, again, with the usability, and how that restriction might impact usability. Then I was asked, please make it a little bit technical. We have a lot of soft skill training, so we are going to get a little nerdy and look at the anatomy of a restriction. Mainly so I can also dig a little bit into those times where you may be using an MDM that's great, but they're not known for first day support. And you may want to know how to create your own restriction, because Apple typically releases restrictions with new features. So it's a good little extra knowledge to have how to create your own restriction profile. So that's the plan. So prohibition. It was introduced in the United States in the 1920s. And it aimed to reduce crime, improve morale, promote family stability by banning alcohol. Okay. Promoters believed that alcohol led to social problems like poverty and domestic violence. But prohibition had unintended consequences. Sure, alcohol consumption initially dropped, but organized crime emerged, corruption increased, and public support declined, leading to its repeal in 1933 with the 21st Amendment. Also, the Berlin Wall. It was a physical and ideological barrier built by East Germany during the Cold War by the East German government in 1966 to prevent mass migration of East Germans to West Germany controlled by the Western Allies. But these restrictions on movement, information, and freedom ultimately eroded people's belief, public support, and the wall crumbled. Metaphorically first and then physically in 1989. So that's past history. In more modern times, the company known as Lumen Industries introduced a restriction on their workers in the form of a surgical procedure known as severance. This procedure would sever the workers' personal memories from their work memories. And this restriction effectively stripped the innies of any knowledge of the outside world, trapping them in a controlled, windowless environment, removing all joy, and this led to dissatisfaction, growing unrest, and ultimately fueled what was known as the macro data uprising. Now, what are these stories trying to teach us? Real as fictional. Restrictions may seem like a great idea at first. Sure, the less freedom of movement our users have, the less inclined they are to get into trouble. But I'm here to promote the way of thinking that that's not necessarily the truth. If we put in too much security and usability suffers, then users get creative, they feel not valued, and they make dangerous, and as history has shown us, unpredictable decisions. So I want to introduce a couple of categories. And I could have made many categories. I wanted to keep it somewhat simple, so I've only tried to create 4 categories, and one of them is very big and one requires an explanation. Just first, I want to make a disclaimer before doing all this. I'm not a security expert. I don't typically work with high security level customers. So anything I say today, any advice I give you, I do encourage that you take it with a grain of salt, use it as an approach, and you must always compare it to your own company situation, your own requirements, your own regulations. So don't go back and say, well, Ulrik said that we should just turn off all the restrictions. Please don't. Now, 4 categories of restrictions. I want to look a little bit at restrictions around accounts. So do we run our accounts as standard users, admin users, or somewhere in between? Some organizations maybe even guest users if they want to. Restrictions around passwords, probably more requirements. How many characters, how many special characters, how often do we require our users to change the password? Then there is one that requires a little bit of explanation. I put configuration profiles, and configuration profiles do all of this, but there is a category of configuration profiles that are not security settings, they're not restrictions, but they can often end up being restrictive in their nature. So those are like hidden restrictions that we do need to watch out for because they can also cause dissatisfaction. And then the big one, security-related restrictions, and the restrictions payload in configuration profiles. And once again, I'm not here selling restrictions. These babies sell themselves, unfortunately sometimes a little too well. I am here promoting that we approach restrictions with the mindset of taking the user's needs into account first. And as such, I want to challenge you with this little framework. Call it an approach. It sounds a little high-reaching to call it a framework. First, when you consider any restriction, consider the user's need. Like, what would be the ideal world? If we had no security fear whatsoever, what would the user like to do? That's a really good starting point. Just remember that we need to take care of the user first, then we start thinking about, all right, what are the vulnerabilities that we are trying to protect against? When we think about this restriction with our IT mind, or we have SecOps looking over our shoulder, what are we trying to protect against? But then also take it a step further. What could be the outcome of us setting this restriction too high? Now, some of the restrictions out there, they're gradual. They're available at different level. So think like, what could the consequence be of setting at the lowest level versus the consequence of being at the highest level? How would that ultimately, what could end up happening with the end user's satisfaction, dissatisfaction? And then with that in mind, we then try to look at the balance and we try to implement a solution. And then keep your mind open that a restriction isn't necessarily set. If it is a restriction that can be balanced, maybe we talk to users, we get some feedback, see if we need to dial it up a notch or dial it down a notch. So it's an ongoing conversation. So I want to briefly, because I'm not going to be able to go through all restrictions in mobile device management in 45 minutes. So I'm going to take like a couple of things from every category and show you how I would apply this framework. This kind of shows that I'm used to doing workshops where I would ask you, what do you think? And I would love to hear, come talk to me. If there's anything you feel I've missed, I would love to improve upon this. But it's just my kind of quick brainstorming in the different categories. So if we start with accounts, account types, do we allow our users to run as the almighty administrator or the generally considered more safe standard user? Yeah, he doesn't look too happy, that standard user, I know. Let's just like a show of hands, who allows your who allows your users to run as admins? See, that's about maybe even a slightly higher than 50%. All right, I like it. If we look at this, this is a topic that's been debated and conversed over the years, and I really like it. It's a good conversation. It has changed over the years. Also, we have more tools available that I want to talk about. But if we take the user's need first, a lot of the users out there, they're not even sure what is the difference between a standard account and admin. They don't care. They just want to be able to install applications that they need for work, if they even know how to install. Then we have the next level of users that would like to have pseudo privileges, and those are typically the ones that we're also a little scared of. But if we take that into account, what are the security risks that we want to mitigate against? Well, we want to make sure that users aren't approving malware or approving attacks of some other kinds. However, if we enforce a restriction too high for the employees that want that freedom, then we can end up in a situation where they get very creative, they do workarounds, they bring in other devices to get that work done, or they have decreased productivity. If it's like a user that doesn't know anything about sudo, but they can't approve something to move on in work, and we haven't made that available in self-service or something, yeah, work stops. So what can we do? Well, if we apply the restriction at the highest level, and I'm not going to go into guest users, but we just permanently let our users be standard users, then that's it. If that's the only choice you have, try it, test it out, see how it works. If you want to take it to the next level, or like take it down a notch, loosen the restriction a little bit, you could use things like privilege escalation. So allowing users to temporarily escalate their privileges. It could either be something you have to apply for, sign a document that you know what you're doing, you realize the risks of this, or you could allow everyone within a certain department, anyone who might need that, to escalate their privileges. Typically, you might also want to escalate logging, so there's more visibility around what users do while they have escalated privileges. If that's something you like and would consider, there are some tools out there. Elevate 24 by our gracious hosts. SAP privileges, which I believe is available on GitHub. And there's an oldie but goldie also, admin by request. So these tools are fairly easy to implement and gradually set them so you can find a level that's proper where you feel the organization is safe, but you give your users more freedom of movement. But then, as my quick poll in the beginning showed, more and more organizations are realizing that Apple has spent the last 10 years putting in a lot of security features in macOS, for instance. So Things like isolating the system to a separate volume. That means even with pseudo privileges, it is very difficult to break something in your computer. You have to maliciously know what you're doing and go at it really hard. So we can use MDM tools to shape the security posture and still allow our users to run as admins. So things like enforcing gatekeeper to make sure that no one can install third-party applications that haven't been signed with a valid developer certificate, or allowing to install other applications through self-service. All right, so that's one down. Password policies. What about password policies? Ooh, man. We all know that users are bad at passwords. Probably I'm going to take a guess that most of us in here think, well, you just got to use password managers. And we know how to do that. We understand that. But I'm here to tell you that the password managers of the real world are little notebooks. Sometimes you can buy them in dollar stores, and they even say passwords on the front of the notebook. Or it's Post-its underneath the keyboard, or even worse, Post-its on the screen. And you know, we want users to be happy. We don't want to be the ones that have to unlock the user's password every time. The user, they want easy access. They don't really care about passwords. Users I talk to, when I tell them, oh, now you need to set a new password for this, they're like, oh, and they can't figure it out. They can't remember passwords. They don't really know what to do. Our concerns is if users have a password that's too simple to guess, it's one of those 20 passwords that everyone uses, or it's made up of dictionary words, it's way too easy to brute force. On Apple devices, the password or the PIN code also are integrated into the encryption key. So ultimately, a weak password then could also result in a weak encryption. Yeah, and we don't want to end up in a situation where we have to walk around every day resetting users' passwords, or even worse. I was told you have to have a duck in the presentation, so. So how do we do this? Well, this one is not as much a gradual change as a bunch of things you can do to improve the experience. First of all, if you are not utilizing the single sign-on extension, if your identity provider has created one, this is like a no-brainer. This is a great experience for the end user and for IT. The end user's experience, they have to sign in once. So even with a complicated password, if you just sign in once, that's okay. And then you just get a token. If you missed Catriona's talk yesterday on tokens, yep, we have a token, and that's now our ticket. Anyone who was at the party last night appreciated having a ticket, just go, yeah, I want another drink, boom. There you go. I want a beach chair, yeah, there you go. That's kind of like how it is to have a single sign-on token. You don't have to send type in your password. And for the IT department, this means that we aren't sending user authentications, usernames and passwords through the air all the time, so we're happy as well. Another thing you can do is make sure you do not restrict biometrics. I've wondered, I would love to speak to someone who have to restrict biometrics because I don't know the reason to do it, but there must be something. Yeah, please talk to me later. Because you are making it much less of a pain for the user to have a complicated password if they only have to type it in, yeah, very, very less frequently than without biometrics. And it's been mentioned a few times at some talks already, but the future, I think, is passwordless. Neil talked about it yesterday. Organizations like Microsoft will now allow you to store passkeys in hardware. So you can store your passkey in Secure Enclave on your phone. It's a pretty simple user onboarding with something like a temporary access pass. And then there is no password that the user has to remember. It means there's no password they can forget. And because it's built on the public key infrastructure, public-private key, there's no password to be phished. So that's the ultimate goal, I think. We're getting closer, and more third-party services are supporting it. But if you are, for instance, only allowing your users to access third-party services that are backed by your identity provider, well, then it's an easy peasy experience for them. OK, so that was accounts and passwords. Now, configuration profiles, the category, I don't know if it's a category of configuration profiles that I want to talk about. These are the config profiles that are not related to security settings. It's not file vault. It's not how long before your computer logs you out if it's unattended. It is things that you think, oh, I'm going to help the user. I'm going to configure their doc settings. I'm going to configure their notification settings so they're productive. But in order to understand why these configuration profiles will, in their nature, be restrictive, we have to dive a little bit into the anatomy of a configuration profile. And what that really means is the anatomy of a property list. So property lists are all over our computer. They're used to store preferences for services and applications. They are used to build launch daemons and launch agents that are background services running daemons on behalf of the system, launch agents on behalf of the users. And then also configuration profiles are also in their essence property list. So they typically end with either a .plist or a .mobile config for a property list. They are structured XML files, text files, but built up of structured XML, which means that they consist of key value pairs. And if you've never heard anything about that, I'll go a little bit deeper into how those key value pairs are structured. You can build them just in a text editor or an integrated development environment. But if you are building anything manually or just building out a few keys for a property list, there are some tools to make command line interface tools like defaults, plutil for more complicated property lists, and plistbuddy as well. Now, the first time I can't even remember when I heard key value pairs, probably with configuration profiles as well. I didn't quite understand what it meant. I'm guessing that some people here have had or still have collector cards, like your favorite sports stars, fast cars. Later in life, I had Magic. I wasn't there in time for the Pokemon wave, but typically they would have your favorite sports star, your Pokemon, or in this case, your severed lumen worker, and they would contain statistics about that, their age, their different attributes. So we store attributes like that in property lists, and we would just consider all of them properties. The key in the key value pair is then enclosed in an XML tag just called key. So it could be something like key is name, and then the value of that key is listed below. But this time the tags are the data type. So for a name, the value would be a string, and it would be Ulrik A in this case. Other data types could include something like the key is age, and the value is an integer, because we may want to do math with that. Is this person older than 21? Can they drink? Yes, they can. Whew, as last night proved. And you'll typically also see a Boolean. I don't know if it's Boolean or Boolean. English, not my first language. Boolean, one or two? Different meanings, yeah. 0 or 1, I should have said. And in this case, it's true. It's a slightly different tag. It's an open and closed tag in once you'll see for Boolean options. There are some other values you might find in, a lot of other values you might find in property lists. So things like real numbers or dates, data blobs, anything like that. It's all stored. And that is used to set almost anything you can find on your Mac. So things like, where's my dock positioned? Oh, orientation is at the bottom. Do I have notifications enabled for my mail program? Nope, I don't like that disturbance. That's my personal opinion. What profile is my terminal starting up with? Very important stuff here. We want to use it in dark mode like Hollywood thinks we do. And then does Safari automatically open safe? I always like that, safe downloads. In my world, that does not mean safe when you have it in quotes, but there we go. These settings, these property lists are typically stored in our personal library. So the user's library, I want, like where I set my dock is my choice. I want it at the bottom. I don't want anyone to mess with that. My notification setting, my settings for Safari. Now, when I go into my MDM, or my evil MDM administrator goes into his MDM in this story, because this is my computer, and creates a configuration profile for mail notifications. Yes, yes. Mail notification should be turned on because users that do not receive their mail, they are less productive. They will not answer their email, and that's very important. We even set the banner type to persistent, so yeah, it doesn't go away until they interact with the banner. And yeah, we can display notifications on the lock screen as soon as they get back from break. They need to be overwhelmed with the amount of emails they've gotten. So this creates, and this is a simplified view of the property list / mobile configuration that's created in the background. So all property lists have this heading, the XML version, the link to Apple documentation about the property list format, and the property list version. And then we see some keys similar to what I showed you before. We have the identifier. This key is specifically, it's in the notifications profile, but it's for the email application. And we see notifications enabled, it's set to true. All right, we saw that in the profile. The alert type is an integer set to 2, which then apparently consolidates to, or resolves to the permanent banner. Yeah, who likes the permanent banner? And showing lock screen is another Boolean value set to true. Now, when I hit save, in my mobile device management system, what happens is a new folder is created on my Mac. It's called Managed Preferences, and anything in the Managed Preferences folder, any key that's set there, if there's no key, well, then my personal notifications plist will be permitted. But any key that's set in the Managed Preferences folder, that overrides the key in my personal preferences. So the result on my Mac is if I go into mail notifications, well, now notifications are turned on. A little difficult to see in the colors here, but it's grayed out. I cannot turn it off. I cannot change the banner setting or anything like that. I'm stuck. So even though it's a configuration profile that we might be setting to try and help the user, in its nature, it ends up being a restriction. They can't turn mail notifications off. So that's kind of the category I'm talking about when I say configuration profiles. Anything that we might think, well, we are trying to keep the user productive, or we might even think that we're helping them. Consider the user needs first. What do they want? Probably the freedom to decide on their own notifications. Their own preferences. I don't want notifications for every app. It stresses me out a little bit. I realized at one point that when I heard the mail ping, I had a little stress reaction. Yeah, I kind of go, oh, more mail I have to deal with. So I want my own freedom to work as I want. And let's face it, what are the security risks for this particular kind of configuration profiles? It's typically fear of reduced productivity. If it's not security related anyway, if it is security related for your particular situation, then I would put it in a different category. So consider if you are going to implement something like this. If it's meant to be a help, move slowly, get early feedback from users, whether they find this helpful or they don't, if they feel like it is a restriction. If your MDM has some sort of self-service, you may be able to offer it and allow users to install it, but also allow users to uninstall it. So that means that they can test it out, and you can even do metrics about how many users are using this. Are we indeed helping users or not? So that's the third category of restrictions. And then the big one, the restrictions payload itself, which grows and grows every year. Almost anything you can do with your Apple device, there is a restriction for it. And then there are a whole subcategory of configuration profiles around security, file vault, firewall, log out time, what do you want to display on the login screen, things like that. That, of course, those need to be in compliance as well. So as there are very many restrictions, I wanted to pick just two at the different ends of the scale. So like a no-brainer at either end. Should you use this or should you not? So I want to talk about restricting airdrop, and I want to talk about the restriction typically known as managed open-in. Let's see. Yeah, I hope I don't have to explain AirDrop in this room. Very, very great, easy way for end users to send files from one device to another. And if that's a need your users have, AirDrop is really easy. It's a very simple, very secure way to send files between your own devices or send them to your colleagues. Now, we might fear data leakage. We might fear that files end out there and we have no control over them. We might have a very specific set of rules around how we share files. But if users need to share files, they're gonna do it. They're gonna find ways. And then if they don't have AirDrop, they might email them to each other or email them between their devices. Yes, I have done this in the days. And we have duplicates. Or they bring in flash drives, external hard drives. And now we have even more versions of that critical data lying around uncontrolled out of our reach. Where at least if AirDrop, we know that it's staying within Apple devices and the security posture we have on those. So this one for me, oh yeah, I forgot to mention, you might also turn off AirDrop or restrict AirDrop. It is part of a lot of the compliances. I think at least CIS1, CIS2, and NIST, they recommend you turn off. Yeah, Joe, I like you talked about it yesterday. This is one of those reasons where it's important to know that you can make a compliance exception. If you are filling out your compliance report, you can put in an exception that you've evaluated the restriction and you feel that we're going to end up in a less secure posture if we restrict AirDrop. So an exception will mean you're also compliant as long as you've documented why you have chosen not to follow that compliance encouragement, or what we call it. All right, managed open-in. This is, first of all, applicable on iPhone and iPad. I can't remember if it's applicable on Vision Pro. I haven't done that much Vision Pro management yet, but mobile devices, mainly iPhone and iPad. And it only applies if you are allowing your users to use their company iPad with their personal apps and personal content. So they have an organization-owned supervised iPad. This restriction, by the way, also works for user-enrolled, account-driven user-enrolled iPad. It doesn't require supervision. But when you have company data and you have personal data, our fear, and this is a good thing, I mean, I encourage organizations to allow their employees to use their company iPad for their personal time as well. The employee will feel more valued. They have a device that they're going to be using in their own time, which means they're more likely to solve challenges. They get to know the device better. So as long as we protect the organization's data, which is probably our security risk, data mixing, we do not want personal data to end up in company sources and otherwise. Managed open-in, just if anyone doesn't know it, it means that if you open something from your managed OneDrive pushed out by your MDM, when you click a file there and it shows you the applications that support that file type, your personal apps that you've installed through App Store will not show up. So you can't move your company email secure attached file to your personal Dropbox, and you can't accidentally save your personal pictures in your organization's OneDrive if this restriction is put in place. It even supports the pasteboard now and contact, so you don't accidentally save a company contact in your iCloud contacts or something like that. I can't think of any situation where this would make the user feel restricted. It's very transparent. The user doesn't really realize it. And I would hate to think that any users really want their data to be stored on company devices. And of course, we don't want it the other way. So I think that one, yeah, turn it on. That's the other one. That's the type of restriction I like. If you have shared devices, if you have organization-owned devices that are being used for personal content, you need to turn that on. All right, man, time is flying by. I want to end up with a little bit of a demo, creating your own restrictions. So in those situations where Apple releases new features and your MDM may not be ready for day one support, or if you are beta testing, as you should be, maybe they're not ready in the beta. And you want to make sure that even though you have beta testers, they don't turn on some particular new features. You're still figuring out what it is. I think the last year's rollout of Apple Intelligence is a really good example because new features were almost introduced with every point update. And if you had beta testers and you didn't know the implication and companies are scared, by the way, the Department of Defense just approved the only AI cloud service that they can use is Apple Intelligence. I think that's a pretty nice stamp of approval, but still, organizations want to be on the safe side. Whenever a new feature and the corresponding restriction is released, you can typically find it on Apple's developer website. There is also a GitHub that Apple maintains. I think that's mainly being used by third-party MDM and applications to hook directly into these new restrictions and have them available very early on. So let's see if we can switch to demo mode. I did record this, but I made proper sacrifices to all the demo gods this morning, and we'll see what they say. So if we go to developer.apple.com and we search for restrictions. Now, I didn't want to base this and wait until the day before and find a new restriction that nobody knew about. So I just want to show you that if we look through here, this gives us all of the keys. It's a huge list. And you can see, for instance, the infamous airdrop I just talked about. It's a Boolean value, allow airdrop, true or false. If false, the system disables airdrop. So that's the key going back to our property list from earlier on. That's the key we need to set. Now, I just made a huge point for not disabling airdrop. So the one that I thought would be a good example in case, I think most MDM will support this, it's fairly old, but content caching. Content caching is the service that allows you to save on your internet bandwidth by turning a Mac into a content caching server, essentially. Was originally part of the server OS, but it's moved into the client now. But if you run or if a personal Mac, someone in your organization goes in and turns this on, it signals to Apple's software update and App Store servers that there is a content caching server in your network. And now other Macs will be redirected to that Mac, and he's already gone home because I know that I leave early. So this is something you really seriously want to consider restricting on non-content caching Macs. They should be always connected, always inside your network, and have room like storage for this. And I'm trying to remember where we need to go. Sharing, content caching, there we go, this one. So if I enable this, I'm going to screw up everyone here. So I won't do that. If we go back to Apple's developer website, and sorry for those who are still dizzy. I know Rob said sorry for dark mode, sorry for fast scrolling, man, that's even worse. You might as well go on that big tower outside. This is a sample profile, configuration profile, and we can see that if we want to set a restriction, so that's for the restrictions in the restriction payload, the preference domain, like the reverse bundle ID that we need to apply it for, is com.apple.application access. So that's, I think, most of the preferences. So it's a text file. I just put it into an IDE because it gives me a little bit of color coding and it's easier to read. You could do it in Xcode or even in a text file if that's what you want to do. There are some examples up here. The three keys I told you about. A Boolean value, allow activity continuation, a string of blocked bundle IDs, and even a rating of apps with integer. Since I'm going to use the content caching as an example, I will delete the other keys. We won't need those. My preference domain here is the right one because it's from that part of Apple's developer documentation. And there is a bundle identifier. Now, this one, the first one here, that's for the payload inside the configuration profile, but you will also see an identifier down here that's for the profile itself. So I will keep it fairly easy, and I'll do TalkTech for that reverse bundle, and I will do the same up here, DK, and I started a little late, so I hope it's okay. I go a couple of minutes over. I'll make this fast. TalkTech. Every configuration profile also has a universally unique identifier. This is what the Mac uses to identify the profile if a new profile comes and there's already a previous one installed with that UUID, that will get replaced by the new one, which is how we update configuration profiles. Fortunately, there is a tool built into the Mac called UUID Gen. So I will use that to get a UID for this one. Boom. And let's do another one for the configuration profile itself, just to be sure. Now, very quickly, I want to show that if we save this, and I'm going to call this com.apple.applicationaccess.mobileconfig, and get rid of that text. As I said, it is just a text file on my desktop. And if I now would upload that, and working for Apple often, if we show one MDM, I'm going to show 3. Just then now be aware, your MDM, of course, does need to be able to support custom configurations or uploading configurations. And you will need to look a little bit at what happens when we do this. If we look in Intune, and I go into configurations, it is not importing a policy because policy is Intune's word for the entire setup of that particular configuration profile. So we do say new policy, and custom configurations is not in the settings, however much I use this these days. It is one of the original templates. You have the opportunity to upload your own custom profile, and I will just give it a name. And watch, if I click here and select my configuration profile, we will see that Intune, in fact, respects everything. They don't change anything. I can't remember if I've discovered they changed the order of some keys, but nothing that has an impact, and it works on your Mac. My particular Mac isn't enrolled in this Intune instance, so I can't demo that much for you. But yeah, that works right out of the box as expected. In Kanji, if you add, Kanji works with these library items that you create first, which is all your settings or your apps, and then you apply it to a blueprint, and you can apply that blueprint to a device. And I believe it's in the general category under custom profiles. And I can create a new one here, add and configure. Slightly big UI here so you can see what's going on. But in this case, Kanji has built in that they do strip and replace certain parts. So in order to keep, I guess, parity without talking to anyone about it, you can see that my configuration profile unique identifier was changed. And if something like that happens, you may need to figure out, do I need to not include that in my custom before I upload it? Depending on your MDM, you might need to do a little more work. A lot of MDMs out there. In Kanji's case, it does work right out of the box like this. You can apply it, and content caching is turned off. And I was locked out, I figured. Thanks to single sign-on, I am in very fast. In Jamf, you will see something else, because if I go into configuration profiles and I upload and I choose my recently created profile, they build things in some places, restrictions being one of them, a little bit different. So if I save this as it is, you will see all I have left is the general payload. The restriction payload disappeared. Now, there is a way you can digitally sign a configuration profile that prevents Jamf from altering it, and it'll just run it however it was, and it would work. But the reason that they're doing this is they have a slightly different way of allowing you to set a custom profile. So there is a specific payload. If I do restrict CC, there is a payload called application and custom settings where we can upload our own configuration profile. In this case, we need to specify the application, Apple. They start with APPL, both of them. Application access. That's our preference domain, and we just need a simple property list. Now, I could fish it out of this, but it's easier to just use the defaults command. So the defaults write command will write out a fully configured configuration profile for me with just a single key. And I'm going to copy from that file, so I just need to save it on my desktop and call it CC. And the key I wanted goes back to the allow content caching. Big surprise if I don't spell this right. The whole demo doesn't work. Allow content caching. That key was a Boolean key, as it said, and we want to set that to false. So if I write that out, I have my property list here. A little harder to see. Let's see if I can zoom in. But we still have that header, the XML version. We have that one key in a dictionary, allow content caching. Hope it's spelled right, and it's set to false. This is, in fact, encoded in binary. So if I upload it directly using this button, it'll look all jumbly. We can convert it using PL-util, but we can also just copy it from preview and paste it in there. So that's nice. Now, if I scope this and I add my demo computer here, and let's see, where am I? Yeah, I'm in content caching. We should be able to see that. If I've spelled anything, yeah, so turned off. And it is now restricted, slightly grayed out, and the service has been restricted by a profile. So that's how you can grab any key and create your own configuration profile. And I'm taking your break, so I will finish off very quickly. Take as much as you want of this framework. Think about the user before you apply a restriction. Consider the different levels you can set that restriction, and make sure you get feedback. Don't just set it and forget it. Maybe consider a way of getting feedback from users, also implementing it in your self-service or on your internal website or anything like that. I've talked about the different types of restrictions for different categories. I talked a little bit about balancing the freedom of the end user. It's kind of the whole goal. The anatomy of a restriction, taking that knowledge and building our own configuration profile. And I caught the ending of Holly's presentation last afternoon. So I did a little research. I have done 104 text prompts, like brainstorming, coming up with a flashy title for the presentation. That has used about 2.6 liters of water to cool graphics cards down, which is not a lot. I thought it would be more. But yeah, a half a kilo of CO2. I have generated 58 pictures. I know I didn't use all of them, but that's an astonishing 270 liters of water and only 128 grams of CO2. And that includes the 2 prompts asking GPT how much this used. So that equates to about 3 cold showers, 100 liter to a shower, and about 6 kilometers in a fuel-driven, so non-electric car. So I'll have to take the bike Sunday to work, and I did take a shower today, after yesterday, but don't get near me tomorrow, because I got to pay back one of those showers. Thank you very much for coming, and I hope you have a wonderful conference.